Hello, and you're listening to Polemics Report for April 18, 2019. This is your host, J.D. Hall. This is the program we hope will be glorifying to God, convicting the sinners, and edifying to the saints. As discernment is, it's a spiritual gift given for the edification of the local body. It's our job to know the difference between right and wrong. And you might ask the question, why a discernment ministry? And the answer is, we're told to train the powers of our discernment with constant practice. Yeah, we want to help you so that you can help your local church, not so that you necessarily leave your local church unless they give to the cooperative program and don't let you opt out. Then you shouldn't take part in the works of wickedness, but rather like expose them. But other than that, you shouldn't leave your church. Hopefully you can find a good church. Check out the Fellowship of Independent Reformed Evangelicals, the ARBCA website. That is the Association of Reformed Baptist Churches in America. The NCFIC, you got to be careful with. There's a lot of junk on there, but they have a tendency to take their theology relatively seriously. Founders Friendly Churches, although you got to be careful because they're Southern Baptists and you don't want to support that wicked cooperative program. But you can find churches, by the way, a lot of independent Baptist churches. Very good. Very good. Here's a tip for you. You're not going to find the perfect church. And if you did, as the old expression goes, you'd ruin it as soon as you got there. You're not going to find one, but maybe you can find one. And if you ask the question, how do you know what a good church is? Number one, they practice church discipline. You live like the devil, they're going to handle it biblically. Secondly, they teach from God's word, hopefully in an expository way, like verse by verse, line by line, precept through precept. That doesn't necessarily mean that a sermon series has to start at the beginning of a book and go to the end. It means that whatever text they're handling it in its proper order to help exegete its meaning so that you understand it. 3, their doctrine is not messed up. Like they got to believe in justification, right? They got to have their basics, their ducks in a row. They got to have the fundamentals of the Christian faith, right? 4, they have biblical leadership, like elders and deacons. They're not a cult. They have, it's organized because organized religion is the only kind worth belonging to, and it's what Jesus himself established. Go find a biblical New Testament church. I am wearing a shirt from the Bible Thumping Wingnut, which you can get from their store. I'm thinking it's somewhere. I don't know. But join the Wingnut Wall on Facebook and listen to all their podcasts, not just mine. And what else? Oh, Crown and Cross Publishing sponsors the program. Crown and Cross Books out of Indiana. Do you want to not be a theological nincompoop? Then start reading good theology. By the way, if you have a local church, you're probably pretty good because you got a pastor that teaches you God's word. But if you want more, support us on Patreon. Get a book sent to you in the mail, and also T-shirt from Crown and Cross, and also T-shirts. If you support us at $34.95 a month, get something sent to you from the Reformed Gear store. And so it's a busy season in my life. I'm traveling to get my family. This was recorded in advance. Oh, you thought it was live, didn't you? It's not. It says premiere, I think, up there on top. And so this is the Reformation Charlotte episode. I ran out of recent material at Pulpit and Pen, like what we've talked about today, which is the last weekend. So I'm going over to our sister site. I don't own it or operate it, but it's run by Jeff Maples, who's a good friend of ours. And we're going to look at material on the Reformation Charlotte page because we like those guys over there. And so we'll still be training the powers of your discernment here on Polemics Report. Thanks so much for listening. Let's go to the number 3 news story of the day. Her again. Jory Micah. She says, now, if you don't know who this is, radical feminist, we've covered her lots of times before. It's what we call low-hanging fruit, which I think Jeff specializes in even more than those of us over here at the Rolex of Polemics Blogs, Pulpit and Pen. Kind of a different flavor at Reformation Charlotte. But low-hanging fruit indeed. Jory Micah says, if God is a man, then count her out. As Jeff writes, she might just be the blondest brunette I've ever seen or heard in my entire life. A true nitwit for sure. That's name calling. All right. It's also true. Amazingly, this feminist, God-hating, anti-Christian troll calls herself a Christian and has a huge following. Actually, it's not that amazing. The Bible says the gate to destruction is wide. I'm not sure if her husband is a theological cuckold or just doesn't own a pair of pants, but maybe Jory burned them all when she took over the marriage. But Jory has practically thrown, this is the harshest thing, Jeff, I just want to say, the harshest thing I have ever heard you, or the harshest thing I've ever read you, no, this is the, this is the harshest thing I've ever read that you have written. But Jory has practically thrown him out to the proverbial dogs to feast on his manhood. Anywho, Jory Micah, pro-abortion, pro-gay, pretty much pro everything the Bible condemns, is an unholy feminist and announces on Twitter that if God is a man, to count her out. I got to take it off that view real quick. Hold on a second. Click that. Let me see. There it is. If God is a man, count me out. I got news for you. It's called the hypostatic union, and not only is God the Father male in the gender that he has assigned to himself, but God the Son is still to this day the God-man. He's been made incarnate, and he is gender. He has a gender. He's not genderless. He's a man. He's the God-man, Jesus Christ. The Arians deny his deity. The Gnostics deny his humanity. It sounds like Jory Micah might be a little bit of both, but in this case, flavored a little bit more towards Gnosticism in her tweet. And furthermore, the Holy Spirit identifies as a man. Now, here's what I want to point out briefly in this brief polemics fix that we've provided for you. Okay, here's the thing. If you believe that people have the right to self-identify, like if a man can self-identify as a woman in your book, or Jory Micah can self-identify as a preacher, okay? Surely the one who made heaven and earth, the creator of all things, gets to self-identify. And he wrote through the hand of Moses, under inspiration of his spirit, in the beginning God created man in his image. Operative word, his image. And even though all mankind is the imago Dei, you can't get around the his image. You see, what they're trying to do is remove pronouns, change pronouns. You can't change the language. God is who he is. So when Jory Micah says, I could never worship a God that is a man, those of us who understand historic and orthodox Christianity and who worship the God-man Jesus Christ go, yeah, we know. We know. Number 2, from Reformation Charlotte, former SBC president praises the politician who stopped a bill that would criminalize abortion. We see it all the time. It's called abolition. I hope that you're not merely pro-life. I hope that you are an abolitionist. I had a fun time explaining the difference between those two things to some folks at a Planned Parenthood in El Paso a few weeks ago. What's abolition? Why are you here? Let's make abortion illegal. Can we criminalize the people who do it? And by that, I also mean the mothers who, murder their children. Can we not criminalize murder? Can we reach that point as a culture? And so there are bills that would simply say, okay, we are recognizing unborn people as people. They're unborn, but they're people. Don't murder them. Almost without fail, at least so it seems, those bills are stopped in committee by people who claim to be pro-life, who favor an incrementalist approach. Listen, I'm an abolitionist. I don't believe in laws that, I'm not affirming of laws that criminalize most slavery, but all of it. I'm not for laws that criminalize some sex trafficking, but all of it. Like if a law came across your desk and you're a legislator, or it's a bill, it's going to become a law, maybe, if you vote for it, that says you can traffic in sex workers, but only above the age of 5, you'd go, this is a bad bill. Can we not criminalize the whole thing? Now, some people would argue that it's not that easy. You can't just up and criminalize abortion. Here's what I have to say, all right? If you have enough votes to pass a heartbeat bill, you have enough votes to pass a conception bill. If you've got 51 votes, or 51% of votes, who will chip away a little bit at the abortion industry and make it a little bit more problematic for them to murder people, you have enough votes to stop abortion if you wanted to. It could happen. I believe it. As a matter of fact, that's what happened with slavery in the United States. There was a time when people said, no, we need to favor an incrementalist approach. And then, there was a little bit of a war in Abraham Lincoln, with the Emancipation Declaration, all of that. It is possible to see a seismic shift and a change overnight. And now a majority of Americans believe in a heartbeat bill. I think if we did our work as Christian soldiers, we could convince people that just because someone doesn't have a heartbeat doesn't mean they're not alive. Yeah, that's right. If they're growing, for example, dead people don't grow. All right, and there's my notifications again, which I forgot to turn off. A sister from church. Good people. Texas HB 896, dubbed the Abolition of Abortion in Texas Act, was by far the most important bill which would have outlawed abortion in the state, criminalizing the act and holding all involved accountable for the crime of murder. Biblical viewpoint that abortion is murder is the underlying tenet of the bill. It says a living human child from the moment of fertilization on fusion of a human spermatozoon with a human, is that a word? I guess it is. Human ovum is entitled to the same rights, powers, and privileges as are secured and granted by the laws of this state to any other human child. The bill was originally authored by Representative Tony Tinderholt about 2 years ago, and pro-life, quote-unquote, Republicans have been split over the bill because it would subject mothers to abort their children to criminal liability. Now, let me give you a little bit of history. When Roe v. Wade was, I was going to say passed into law, but the judiciary doesn't make laws. And the 14th Amendment oversteps its bounds on that point, I believe. But, Marbury versus Madison. Is it Marbury versus Madison? I question judicial review. But either way, even if they're reviewing laws, they don't make laws. Like gay marriage should not be legal in the country because the Defense of Marriage Act is still on the books. So thank you, courts. Was it Andrew Jackson who said the Supreme Court has decided the law? Now let me see them enforce it. We need to have a balance of powers that, we need to have checks and balances, rather. Balance of powers is tricky if you're a Federalist. We need to have checks and balances because that's a little bit different, in which the power is maintained first and foremost in the people through the legislative bodies of various House and Senate of the respective states. How did I get on that? I don't know. Oh, so when Roe v. Wade was passed into law, the majority opinion of the Supreme Court was the reason we voted the way that we did is because in Texas, you say that abortion is taking a human life, but you're not penalizing the abortion doctor in the same way that you would punish a murderer, and you're not penalizing the mother at all. Therefore, you must not really believe that this is a human life. And they're still doing it in Texas. You still have, it's Texas's fault. Thanks, Texas. And now because they're inconsistent, and everyone knows that inconsistency is a sign of a failed argument. And so you have these quote unquote pro-lifers who are going, we don't want to punish the mother. The what? The mother who murdered her child, who hired a hitman to assassinate her kid? Yes, we do. I want murderers behind bars. We're not talking about ex post facto laws where we punish people for what they did before the law was passed. We're talking about you pass a law, say it's murder, treat it as such. Jack Graham, the former president of the Southern Baptist Convention and pastor of Prestonwood Baptist Church, one of the largest megachurches in America, praised Leach on Twitter, saying, I support him 1,000%. You are undermining your position, pro-life Christians, when you say that abortion is murder, but don't treat the parents who do it as murderers. You're undermining your position. Everybody's going, so you must not really think that fetus is a human life. This is why abortion is legal. Texas has done this before. Now, the bill, Jeff writes, could have been the most effective sanctity of life legislation in the history of the state, protecting the unborn child from the conception to birth and upholding criminal murderers accountable. Graham Leach and those pro-life dissenters of the bill claim to believe in the sanctity of human life. Some even say that abortion is murder, but they don't have interest in passing legislation consistent with what they say they support. This is an actual matter of social justice. If you believe in social justice, believe in putting to death people who kill children. There's your justice. So, number one for today's topic. Are we going to disagree with Jeff at Reformation Charlotte, a man who shares my brain? Are we going to disagree? This broadcast is brought to you by Mountain Dew. Not really, but I am. I'm brought to you by Mountain Dew. It's got electrolytes. Christians should advocate for the criminalization of homosexuality. Should it, though? I mean, we want to criminalize abortion because it's murder, but what about homosexuality? Jeff says, if we're honest, anyone can see that homosexuality has a detrimental effect on society as a whole. The militant pro-homosexual campaign has advocated for the destruction of the family, an institution that has been a solid foundation for stability in society since creation. Marriage between one man and one woman is a creation ordinance given by God not only to the church, but to the world, along with his command to be fruitful and to multiply. The Bible speaks of homosexuality and sexual immorality as being given over by God to the disgraceful lusts and desires of human nature. Romans 1 makes the judgment clear. It is an unnatural perversion of God's design for his creation. And Jeff is right about all of this. He says, sadly, many Christians have turned a blind eye to the destructive effects of the pro-homosexual society and have advanced for a gospel-only approach. It's not uncommon to see homosexuals and transgender people sitting in the pews at church, at my church. I'm not arguing that the church as a whole should take a gospel approach. It should. After all, homosexuality is the result of rebellion against God and a product of human depravity, the kind of depravity that makes women think they're men and makes men think they're women. But God ordained the civil government for a purpose, and the purpose is to bear the sword of justice, Romans 13. I might also add to that 1 Peter chapter 2, to punish the wicked and to reward the good. And he says he's not advocating a theonomic society, that which holds to the Old Testament civil code. So he's not advocating that they be put to death by stoning. But let me ask you the question. When you think about concepts like law and what should be legalized and what shouldn't be legalized, I would ask you the same question a theonomist would. And that is, by what standard? Whose law do you believe should be enforced? Now, my answer may surprise you, but probably not if you've been listening for any period of time. It may surprise you on this particular issue, but my answer is God's law. A theonomist would mean including the civil penalties, but I don't know any theonomists anymore. Joel McDermott's not one. It's Gary DeMar. By the way, American Vision has produced some quality material lately. I think now that Joel's gone, maybe they're going back to conservatism. I don't know exactly. My argument is God's law, particularly the second table of God's law. When Jesus says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's, what this means is, reading my messages. Hey, Edgar, tell me how to turn that off. What that means is God has his domain is the wrong word. Everything is God's domain. God has his jurisdiction, but he has farmed out a jurisdiction to Caesar. He has said that government should exist to punish evil and reward good, 1 Peter 2. I would ask the question, who gets to define evil and who gets to define good. If it's not God, I don't know who else is going to do it. Furthermore, Romans 13 says a minister of God does not carry a sword in vain, but a minister of God carries that sword to do vengeance upon all those who do evil. And so when people say things like conservatives, for example, when they say things like, we're not voting for a president, we're not voting for a pastor, we're voting for a president, I go, hold on a second. But, well, it is true we're not voting for a pastor, but you can't rule out the importance of morality because we are electing a minister. We are electing a minister of God, to carry out vengeance upon those who do wicked and to reward the good. So things like personal morality, they are important. When faced with a binary choice between the Antichrist, Hillary Clinton, and her cousin, Donald Trump, just kidding. Sometimes there are binary choices, but let's not kid ourselves. The government is not established as a minister of God to enforce what laws? Now, 1 Peter chapter 2 says, be subject to every human ordinance. That's in the Greek, it's katinos anthropinus. And so it says human ordinances, meaning that not necessarily just the moral law given to Moses, but those laws extrapolated from it in the same way that we're told to submit to either the emperor or to the governors that he has sent as though supreme. And so we submit both to the emperor and those other lesser magistrates. Likewise, we submit to God's law, and whatever human laws are there in time and place as important, again, substitutes is the wrong word, but important agents of God's will on earth. So if we're to believe that morality comes from God and laws are inherently a matter of morality, my answer is we enforce the second table. God will handle his Sabbath day. God will handle blasphemy against him. God will handle idolaters and those who worship false gods. But there must be laws that enforce the second table, how we are to treat one another. There must be laws against murder. There must be laws like abortion. That's the 6th commandment. There must be laws demanding that children obey their parents. This is the 5th commandment, which is typically seen as the first commandment of the second table. As a matter of fact, in Montana, it's called youth in need of supervision. You can't disobey your parents. It's actually against the law. That's an important rule. It's an important law. It's an important statute. Youth in need of supervision. The 6th commandment, don't murder. The 7th commandment, which we'll get to in a minute. The 8th commandment, don't steal. We need that law, don't we? Right? Don't bear false witness, the 9th commandment. We need laws against perjury. We need laws about lying when you're under sworn testimony. And the 10th commandment, against coveting, which is actually a sin of the heart. It's kind of hard to criminalize coveting, but we can criminalize what it inevitably leads to, which is, again, socialism, basically. So then, if we enforce the 5th, 6th, 8th, 9th commandments, and in a way, the fruit of the 10th commandment, why would we not have laws protecting the 7th commandment? And so it's for this reason that in order to be consistent, consistency is my reason, I would say the government does need to enforce the 7th commandment. I think that adultery, for example, should be a criminal offense. You've entered into a contract with your wife and the state with a marriage license. Why should adultery not be criminalized? I'm not saying lock them up. I think far fewer people need to be jailed. Why not fined? Community service? Slap on the wrist? Probation? Something? They violated their contract with the state, even. Now, some Christians would argue we need to get out of the marriage business altogether. It is a compelling view. I've waffled on that subject from time to time, especially with gay marriage, like maybe they should get out. It would be harder for the government to enforce the 7th commandment if there were no marriage laws on the books whatsoever. Think about it. So I'm going to throw the question out to you. I'm going to ask you the question. If we should enforce the 7th commandment, if you buy that supposition, does that then mean, after all, if the government if you want the government to recognize only straight marriages, you would ask why. We would say because of the seventh commandment, because sexual sin falls under the seventh commandment. Why would you not criminalize homosexuality? So read Jeff's post, reformationcharlotte.org. Should we criminalize homosexuality? Give me your thoughts and send me your emails, jd@pulpitandpen.org. And you know what? Maybe, no, don't send it to that one. Send it to talkback@pulpitandpen.org. Maybe there's a middle view. Maybe we don't have to enforce all of the seventh commandment. Maybe we can just enforce some of it, like marriage contracts. Maybe we should prohibit gay marriage, but not necessarily prohibit what happens behind closed doors. Furthermore, how do you fit in, something we may talk about in future episodes, how do you fit in libertarianism? The belief that you should do whatever it is that you want to do, and you should be allowed to do whatever it is that you want to do, so long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. How do you fit that into the government's responsibility in Romans chapter 13 and 1 Peter chapter 2? And I ask that question as a raging conservative. Just things to think about in today's program. Reformation Charlotte, check them out. The Reformed Gear Store, Bible Thumping Wingnut. I'm traveling, so it's a truncated episode. God bless you, everybody. Support us if you can. If not, I at least hope you're giving sacrificially, regularly, and faithfully to your local church. God bless you, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. And until then, as always, Semper Reformanda.